How can we improve the U.S. education system? Private schools versus public schools. Private schools have always been a different path for parents and students to choose as a way of schooling. They prepare students for high-ranked colleges and well-paying jobs. In a world that's becoming more and more technologically based, these well-educated students are taking over the workforce. The one problem with this is that many families can't afford to send their children to expensive private schools. Therefore, many public school students aren't offered the same opportunities as the students attending private school. One way that people could create more opportunities for children is by putting more money into public schools, but that money can't come from the government alone. If private school families invested the time and money that they previously put into private schools into public schools, then overall many more students could have a better education and many more opportunities in their futures. Advantages to private school. Private schools have many advantages, including smaller class sizes, flexibility with curriculum, typically better test scores, and more students taking advanced classes. Private schools are also not required to follow the rules and regulations of a district. Independent groups of people fund private schools, which let each school choose what to invest their money in. There are many advantages to private schools, with only a few disadvantages like expensive tuition and possible lack of special programs. Advantages to public school. The advantages to public education are that teachers have to be state certified and there is no tuition to attend public school. Public schools educate a majority of the students in the nation, which is why they are so important. Public education does come with many disadvantages, including small budgets, large class sizes, and less flexibility with curriculum. Each public school must also comply with its district's rules and regulations. Are private schools on a decline? Originally, private schools were formed as an alternative place to educate students. Now, private schools are being replaced by public schools, online programs, and charter schools. According to Chester E. Finn Jr. from The Atlantic, 3 out of 4 students attend public schools. Many private schools are now considered unnecessary or too expensive over public and charter schools. In fact, private school enrollment shrunk by almost 13% between 2000 and 2010. With private schools on a decline, many of them have begun to go out of business. For example, 44 out of 156 elementary schools in Philadelphia closed in 2013. Public school budget crisis. Public schools and districts are severely underfunded and unorganized. This contributes to the lack of opportunity presented to public school students. The United States government funds public schools, and for many years primary and secondary schools have been put aside and the budget for public schools has been dangerously low. Private school funding comes from private institutions or individuals as well as from the tuition of students, and each school is able to invest their money wherever they choose. Since public schools have large class sizes, many students don't receive the proper education and assistance that they require to reach their potential, and this is due to the lack of funding from the government. The state of Washington is attempting to fix the budget for education, but according to Seattle Times reporter Neil Morton, quote, Senate Republicans admitted that their preferred plan to fully fund K-12 education would cost more than originally projected, end quote. On the economic side of things, public schools are lacking, but with money, investment, and focus from private school families and from community states and the federal government, public education could become something completely different. Classes and curriculum. Students attending both public and private schools are affected by stress. Public schools and prep schools are known for having large workloads and difficult curriculum. Opposite of that, public schools typically have very small amounts of work and easier classes unless students choose to take honors or advanced placement programs. Many public school students choose to take the easier route with regular classes, which doesn't give those students the opportunity to be accepted into elite post-secondary schools. Many would say that those students choose to take the easier classes, but many of them learn in many different ways, and with such large class sizes, it's impossible for teachers to show the different learning ways. Educator Anthony Cody, in an article to the Washington Post, states that, quote, the Wall Street Journal recently carried a report about a study that found that students are often affected by the stress that adults working with them are experiencing. At a time when education reform and budget cuts often seem to be making schools more stressful, this seems like a very significant issue, end quote. This shows how public schools are impacted by low budgets and less focus. Private schools have much smaller class sizes, which gives students the opportunity to learn in ways that benefit their learning style and brain the most. In Richard Nixon's speech, the Address to the Nation on Labor Day, he speaks of how the country should not lose the American work ethic, no matter how the economy or employment rate is. This relates to children in public schools who are not able to learn properly due to their large class sizes. Public schools with more investment and focus could have smaller class sizes, which would lead to children taking advanced courses which would ultimately benefit the future since jobs have begun to require higher education. The future of students. In the article A World Without Work, written by Derek Thompson, he states that, quote, an era of technological unemployment in which computer scientists and software engineers essentially invent us out of work. The total number of jobs declines steadily and permanently, end quote. Private schools and private boarding schools are typically known for giving students the ability to be accepted into top colleges, which usually leads to those particular students majoring in computer science and software engineering. This pushes many public school students who may not have the ability to attend private school out of the pool of potential workers for those fields. With so many occupations rendered useless by new technology, and with many people unemployed due to their inadequate education, improving public school and closing private schools would give many more students greater opportunities in the future. Solutions. Overall, private schools have many more advantages than public schools, but what if these advantages can be part of public schools instead of just private schools? These private schools offer many opportunities for the future of each student, but these benefits come at the cost of an expensive tuition and privately funded institutions. Public charter and online schools cost nothing to attend, yet have very few opportunities despite the fact that most of the population attends them. Private schools are already on a sharp decline, although they continue to offer better opportunities, smaller class sizes, and therefore a more personal time between teachers and students. On the other hand, money for public schools is spread very thin, and education for many students in the nation is insufficient. With more investment, work, and public schools could eventually offer similar opportunities to private schools. Community and private investment in local public schools and districts would also contribute to many students' education. The best solution is to make schools a priority and to close private schools so that every student and parent is able to contribute to bettering the education of the next leaders of the nation. Thank you. I'm excited.
Thanks. First question, how valid and reliable are the sources you used, and how do you know? And were there any sources that did not work?
I did see a few sources that were very biased depending on alumni from either private or public education and people who, only analyzed one side of the argument. But all of my sources were from very reliable places like The Atlantic, which one of our stimulus materials was from.
What advice would you have for other researchers who consider this topic?
Well, I would advise them to go in with previous knowledge. Like, I've been to both private and public education, so I had that experience going in, and I would advise them to use to look at the research of a lot of the political lens, because it shows the budget crisis for public schools and how that affects a lot of the students in the nation.
Thank you.